Yes, sir, we're going. All right. Hello, friends. Thanks for tuning in. Glad you're with us. I have a special guest with me today. I started following this gentleman in the probably the late 70s, and then went to Bailey Hall, Cornell University to see my first show. He was playing, and it was the Pat Metheny group. And that was it, man. It sealed the deal. I was a fan ever since of the whole group and the people individually in the group. Um, So let me just get right into the introduction. I am so pleased to have one of my influences and musical heroes with me today, and his name is Danny Gottlieb. How you doing, man?
Good. Hey, Carl. Thank you for inviting me to be part of your series.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Totally. Totally. Yeah, I'll never forget that show at Bailey Hall. I was 18. It was first year of music school for me up here in Syracuse, and a group of us went down. And oh, well, first of all, let me just say this. I've seen you with Metheny many times, and every time I cried.
Ah,
The music is so beautiful, the way you all work together in the compositions. And I'll never forget the first time I think I didn't go to school the next day because I was really messed up in a good way.
wow.
What was it like for you? I know you guys, now I don't mean to, I want to ask you a question, but I believe, did you meet in Boston? Was it Berkeley where you kind of got
No,
together? You're one of
no.
the, no, okay.
I was part of a whole different thing. There was a whole scene with students at the University of Miami in Florida,
Ah,
and
okay.
I was part of that. And I was lucky enough. I was born in New York, but grew up in New Jersey. And I didn't start the drums till pretty late when I was 15. I played a different instrument. I played the cello, and I was
Oh,
awful. My mom played violin, and in fourth grade, I went to get a violin because mom played the violin. I didn't have one. I got a cello. This is school, public school, New Jersey, and I was a good faker. I had an ear, but I never practiced, and I just the cello wasn't the thing for me.
okay.
And there was this summer. Well, I kind of leading up to how the whole
Oh,
thing
no,
began.
that's cool. Yeah.
There was a summer music school program in New Jersey run by Morty Geist, who unfortunately recently passed away, but he was my first music teacher who dealt with me with the cello in middle school and high school. And we used to do these plays, and we were doing West Side Story, and there was a friend who I grew up with named Dave Urig, who was the drummer, played in
Yeah.
that middle school band. And he had his cute girlfriend, he played the drums, there was a thing about the drums. And Dave took me under his wing, and I could sort of do it. I could just kind of play the drums somehow. And
Uh-huh.
Mr. Guy in that summer music program let me play the drums and took lessons. And I had a local teacher for a minute. And then lo and behold, 5 minutes from where I was living in an apartment in New Jersey, there was this music store called Dorn and Kirshner. And I went in one day to buy a drum head. And Joe McCarthy, who was in charge of the drums, said, "That's Joe Morello." And I said, "Who?" He said, "Joe
Whoa.
Morello played with Dave Brubeck. Look, he's on the cover of the Ludwig Drummer magazine."
Oh, wow,
That
man.
guy. So I immediately asked him if I could take lessons, and Joe, had a thing where he would evaluate you, and basically he'd have you play, and then he'd play faster than you could play, but with one hand, and just kind of show you that there were things to be done on the drums that you didn't even imagine. And I started studying with Joe when I was in high school. So that was the beginning of my drumming. And
That's
I
so
could
cool.
do it. I don't know. And then through Joe and then Mr. Geist influence, well, do you want to hear the whole thing? I mean, I can give you the
Oh,
full.
yeah, yeah. And I'm just gonna, not to interrupt, I took 2 lessons with Joe,
Did you?
probably around 2006 or seven. And everything was set up through his wife. And I went to, I think, North Orange County, New Jersey, upstairs in this building. And
Yes.
he did, like I do in the rehabilitation business, I do assessments, right? But he did an assessment, and then his left hand blew me away, and I almost wanted to quit. But then I decided this is very inspiring, and he is the man.
Yeah.
The stick control and everything was beautiful.
Yeah. Well, he studied with the author of Stick Control. George Lawrence Stone was his teacher, and there was a
Oh,
whole methodology of how to hold the stick and how to not have tension. That way you can play with the left hand and just same.
jeez, man. Yeah,
To say it's a whole thing, and I just lucked into it when I was a
that's
kid. So
great, man. So you
you know,
ran into him at that store. You started for a couple. You would. How long did you take lessons with him?
Well, it was 68 when I met him, and then I went off to college in 71. But at the same time, Mr. Geist, my music teacher, who had the jazz band in high school, was a jazz saxophone player who had been touring with a bunch of big bands and quit to teach, school. He got a day gig teaching, but he
Yep.
was a jazzer, so he used to play jazz in detention. The kids were bad, so we all just would hang out after school. And he'd play Miles Davis, and the big thing, we were into big bands. And the first thing he said to me, "You're going to play the drums. Listen to the recording. Basie straight ahead. Basie straight ahead. Harold Jones on drums."
There it is.
The next thing was Art Pepper plus 11, Mel Lewis on drums.
Oh man, Mel.
And Mel and Thad had just started their band. It was playing Monday night. They were playing Monday at the Vanguard.
Mhm.
So we used to go in with Mr. Geist underage and go to the Vanguard and see Thad and Mel.
That is so cool.
So I was studying with Joe, and we'd go see Thad and Mel. And I asked Mel Lewis at one of the Vanguard. I had a lot of nerve when I was younger. I went up to Mel and said, "Mel, I love your cymbals. Can I take a lesson with you? I'm studying with Joe Morello." He said, "No, I'm too busy. I'm too busy." So at one of the lessons with Joe at Dorn and Kirshner's in Union, I said, I saw Mel the other night, and I asked him about taking a lesson. He said he's too busy. He said, "Too busy? Call the Union. Get his number. Let's talk to him." So I call 802. I get Mel Lewis's number. I call him on the phone. "Hi, I met you the other night, Danny Gottlieb. I'm taking a lesson with Joe Morello. Joe wants to talk to you." So I get Joe. Joe comes in. "What are you talking about? Come on, you're too busy. This kid loves your cymbals. Would you get together with him, please?" And Mel went, okay. So I had just gotten my driver's license. I was 17, and Joe was living in Irvington, New Jersey. Mel was living in Irvington, New York, and I started to make a trek up to Mel's house and take there were lessons, but it was really Mel just playing me music that he played on.
Oh.
And he started allowing me to go with him to gigs.
Whoa.
He did the jazz cruise. I'd sit and watch. He even took me to the recording of Sweet for Pops, which was
Really?
and he let me sit in a corner, and I just, watched the whole session. And at the end, there's a thing called "A Good Time Was Had by All," where everybody has to play percussion. He let me play a cowbell. I'm on the recording playing cowbell.
Oh, that must have been such a thrill. That had to be amazing.
So here I had these two, kind of different versions of jazz drumming greats at my disposal in high school.
Right.
But I still didn't know, what do you want to do with your life? Do you want to be a musician? Do you want to this? And my parents used to take me for these aptitude tests, and it would come up musician, and and I didn't know what to do. And a friend of mine in high school's father had gone to University of Miami and gotten a music degree, and said, "You should check out Miami because it's a great music school." And it turned out they were the only college in America, only school that offered a half business, half music degree called music merchandising.
Whoa.
And I just said, I don't know what I wanted. Let me just try that. And it was now, schools like that are, $30,000 a semester. It was, I think, $7,000 a year in 70.
Yeah,
So
right.
Still expensive, but it was sort of affordable. I made an audition tape with Joe Morello where they didn't even specifically ask to do something, but I played some rudiments, and my role was really awful. Just trying to play a closed role.
Yeah,
and Joe, we had a reel-to-reel, and Joe had me just do a roll like this, and he turned the volume up on the recorder, so it's sounded like this amazing roll. I sent the tape in, and I got into the school before they even got the tape. I got accepted.
Oh, so wow.
It was just, University of Miami, here I come, half business, half music. And Ludwig Drums used to do a thing where they had a percussion symposium, drum percussion symposium. Is that what it was called? Ludwig?
Was that at the university?
Well, they would vary where they would have it, but in 1971, summer of 71, as I was about to go to Miami in the fall, they had it at the University of Miami in the summer.
Okay.
So Joe and I and John Riley and another drummer, Bob Muskis, and I think maybe Steve Foster and a bunch of Joe's guys, we all made a trek down to Miami to go to the percussion symposium. And while I was there, I just wandered over to the jazz department, and I said, I'm a freshman, I'm going to be coming in. And Jerry Coker was doing a summer workshop.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Last year at University of Miami, he had me sit in with the band. And so I got in the top band as a freshman because of being down there, and I could play. So I could read. I was, hanging out with all these people. So that started my entrance into University of Miami.
Okay.
first year, and at that point, I had was it that year? I think it was the second year. I somehow must have gotten through music merchandising for 1 year, and it really wasn't taking. And in the second year, 1972, Pat Metheny came in as a student.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so to answer your original question, I met Pat at school as a student. He came in the second year.
No kidding.
Mark
Okay.
Eden, playing bass, was also a student there.
Uh-huh.
It was Bill Goldstein, who Pat just did that album with recently.
Yeah, yeah.
And Will Lee, the great bass player, his dad was the dean, Dean Lee.
No kidding, really? Oh, I had no idea.
Clifford Carter, keyboard player. Hiram Bullock was there.
No way.
Rod Morgenstein.
Oh, geez.
We were all students.
It's like an all-star bunch of students right there, man.
It was something. And as soon as I started playing with Pat, he and I hit it off. And we used to just play drums and guitar all the time at school. And I'd be sitting up in the room trying to do accounting problems and driving me nuts because I wanted to play music. So
yeah.
I didn't tell my parents. I switched to a jazz major, and Pat and I were kind of inseparable at that point in college. We had a faculty student group with, after Jerry Coker was there, Dan Hurley was there, who subsequently went to North Texas.
Right.
Dan was a big influence at that time because he was telling me all about Ed Soph. And as soon as 5 years later, or 4 years later, when I got out of school, I actually took lessons with Ed Soph also. That was another thing when he lived in New York. And Ed used to let me follow him around when he was playing with Woody Herman. So I used to go, I used to follow everybody around.
See, that's so. I saw him with Woody one time, Ed Soph, and then the next time I saw, or maybe before that, I saw it was the brother, Joe LaBarbera. Yeah.
Great. So that's how I met Pat. We were friends in college. We played together all the time. And then the story goes on from there if you want to hear more, but just whatever.
Oh, yeah. What's interesting to me, and if you don't mind talking about it, because I love to hear about it, I'm finding that, after 35 years being a drummer, musician for a living, it wasn't my passion after the first 10 years or so, but I did it because I'm not great by any means. I'm just versatile and whatever. And that's what I knew how to do. I didn't know how to do anything else. But finally, I found a new pathway that I love. And at this point, the music to me is more fun to listen to because I'm not trying to, but not that I want to be like anybody, but when you're trying to improve yourself, sometimes you hear an influence, you want to do exactly that. So it's better to forge your own identity. But the other thing I really enjoy so much is stories like these. It's history. It's history that happened that is so interesting that a lot of people, I never knew any of this stuff. Yeah. I think it's awesome. Yeah. So you met Pat there. You were hanging out with Pat in Berkeley. I'm sorry, Miami. And then, now when did the Pat Metheny group start? Well,
I can give you the kind of chronology if you want to hear the details of what it was. Pat and I, again, played at school. Pat was so good that he became a teacher very quickly.
Okay.
And Jocko was also not, he was kind of an adjunct, but he would give lessons at the school too. And Pat and Jocko hit it off. And I got to play with Jocko a little bit, which was scary to me because he was so, come on, Gottlieb. He was like so intense. I was, trying to play with little sensitive cymbals, and he's like a train.
Yeah.
Experience and fun. And Mark Egan took some lessons with Jocko at school.
That's cool. Wow.
It was a great environment. And we would just like hijack the school. Like the school would supposedly close at 8 o'clock. We'd sneak in and stay in a room. The guards would go, and then we'd play music all night. It was, it was the 70s. It was hippies. It was about playing. I mean, Hiram used to have these funk bands that would play all the time, and the Dixie Dregs with Steve Morse and Rod. They
no kidding, man.
They were a group at school. They got credit for the Dixie Dregs.
No kidding, isn't that cool? Wow.
So we were there, and Pat Pat also was obsessed with Gary Burton, the vibraphone player.
Right. Yeah.
They had met at a festival, and after 2 years at University of Miami, Gary got him a teaching job at Berkeley.
Okay.
So Pat left school without finishing his degree and went to Boston to teach at the school. Mm-hmm. And I was a year older, so I still had 1 more year. And Pat got me this incredible gig through, there is a guitar player named Wayne Johnson, who is one of my favorite musicians ever. We haven't been in touch lately, but Wayne was from Spokane, Washington, and he played jazz guitar in the style of, Mick Goodrick, Pat Metheny, but he also played banjo and had a country thing. He went on to play with the group, the Manhattan Transfer, for maybe 20 years and kind of left that. But Wayne had a group, this was summer of 74, and he had a band, and they had a couple of gigs, and he needed a drummer, and Pat up in Boston recommended me. So sight unseen, I flew out to meet Wayne in Colorado Springs. We played in a hotel for 4 weeks, and it was a quartet very similar to Gary Burton's. It was Bill Molenhoff on the vibes, and Dewey DeLay on bass, and Wayne and I. Wow. And he also had a singer who went on to become quite popular named Oleta Adams. She had a couple of hit records.
Yep, I remember that name.
Yeah, she was a friend of Wayne's from Washington. So she was the singer. We had this band. We played in a hotel. And in the daytime, we would go horseback riding and all kinds of cool stuff. And then Wayne had a van, and we drove up through Teton and Yellowstone, and we played at Expo 74 in Spokane.
Wow.
And then at the beginning of when they built that opera house and the waterfall and thing. And then we played in Alaska for 6 weeks.
No kidding. Wow.
A hotel, Anchorage westward. And it was kind of a mercenary time at that point. Not mercenary, it was just, they were building the pipeline. So you had crazy people from all over the world coming to Alaska to work on the pipeline. So we played in a hotel, and it was a cast of characters, just crazy people. And it was the most fun summer, playing this music and being out and going up to Mount McKinley and touring the wildlife parks. And it was just amazing. Mm-hmm. So then I come back to Miami this is end of 74, fall of 74. I have 1 year left to go at school, and Pat's up in Boston, and I come back, and we had Jerry Mulligan as an artist in residence for a whole semester at Miami. Wow. And I heard that, I think it was supposed to be Clark Terry was going to come in for a semester. Mm-hmm. And I thought, okay, I need 1 more year. Let me finish the degree. And my parents, who never put pressure on me in any way except to finish college. They didn't care what the degree was. They just said, and they didn't say you have to, but their wishes were to do that. So I get back to school, and Pat calls me and says, "What are you doing? Come to Boston. You going back to school? You don't need to be in school. Get your money back. Come up tomorrow. We got to play music." And then Wayne, who we just finished this great tour, was moving to LA, and he called and said, "Danny, we have a bunch of gigs. Why don't you come out to LA? Let's keep the band going." And I had a nervous breakdown. It was the most, I just mentioned it because I just remembered it now. It was the most emotional. What do I do with my life? Do I want to finish school? Do I want to play with Pat Metheny up in Boston? Do I want to go to LA? And then I played a gig with Carmen Cavallero, who was this flourishing piano player. Yeah. He was going to Japan, and he said, "Danny, you want to come to Japan?" And I was like, and then I talked to my parents, and I said, I'm thinking about maybe leaving school. And they said, "Look, it's your life. You can do what you want, but you know what we would really want you to do." Yep. And it just it's that desire to play music. Yeah. And it's just so frustrating. And I ended up staying in school and finishing my degree. I felt like that was the best move. And subsequently, I teach at a university now, and I never would have gotten that had I not done that. So exactly, yeah. So Pat was in Boston, and Pat got in Gary Burton's band, to continue the actual question that you asked. So Pat was teaching at Berkeley, and I heard something that I think it was Gary was thinking of hiring Al Di Meola to play or something, or Pat was offered a chance to go play with Chick Corea. There was some weird thing where Gary felt compelled to add Pat to his group. Mm-hmm. So Gary Burton added Pat to the Gary Burton Quartet, which had Mick Goodrick on guitar, but he kind of insisted that Pat play 12-string only. Mm. So if you listen to the recordings, Dream So Real and Ring, which were the two albums Pat did with Gary, this was 75, Pat was only playing 12-string guitar as to have a different voice than Mick Goodrick. Yeah. But Pat gets into Gary Burton's group. I stay in school. I start to follow them around, Gary Burton's group, with Bob Moses on drums, who I just fell in love with. Oh, God, yeah. Who became the ridiculous influence. And sure. Also. So I was following them, and then I get out of. Do you want the whole story? I could just keep.
You keep talking, man. I'm all ears. I've got all day. But stop when you need. You don't need to, but keep going. I mean,
Pat's playing with Gary Burton, and I graduate school somehow. I got through school, and my piano playing was bad. I had to actually go back and take a final with Whitsider. It was kind of, I got through it somehow. But I was playing shows on Miami Beach. That's how I made my way through school.
Oh,
I didn't
yeah.
get a scholarship, but to pay my expenses, I used to play a lot of. They had tons of hotels and drummers.
Yeah.
You could play all kinds of shows, and I also used to play at the Coconut Grove Playhouse. The Broadway shows that would come through, and in fact, Pat Metheny and I both played Godspell one.
Really?
I have the program of it. In fact, it was the year that the Dolphins won they were undefeated. And we played a halftime show, Pat Metheny and I, of Godspell in the Army.
Oh, no kidding.
I have pictures of it.
That's pretty cool.
I was playing shows, and one of the shows I played on the beach was Bobby Rydell, who was a 50s rock star.
Yeah.
He was a drummer, and of all things, he was lefty, but he was a drummer, and he only carried a drummer on the road. So right when I was about to graduate, Bobby had a tour to Australia, and he said, "I need a new drummer. Would you like to be my drummer?" And I said, "Yeah." So for a year, I became the touring. It was just Bobby and me, and I would rehearse the band. You'd go to a place with a 12-piece book, and I'd rehearse the band.
Right.
Okay, 1, 2, and we'd play 4 notes. Okay, next 2. I was I had a leisure suit. It was just, but I got to play, and Bobby. I loved it, but Bobby, it was frustrating because he took a drum solo in the middle of the show, and I didn't. So I was not jealous, but I had to turn the drums. He was a lefty and turn them around. But
oh yeah, right.
I toured for a year with Bobby Rydell, and I loved it. And Pat at first thought I was crazy. He said, "You're a jazz guy. Bobby Rydell? What are you doing?" he eventually came to a gig and actually sat in and had a good time.
Uh-huh.
And Bobby used to do all these shows in Florida, like Bachelor's 3, where Jocko used to play in the band. Jocko played Bobby Rydell's show.
No way. Wow.
So I spent a year touring. I moved up north. Well, there's the way I ended up leaving Bobby and moving to New York. My grandmother had passed away, and my parents had inherited an apartment in Maplewood, New Jersey, and I ended up moving into that apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And I was on the road with Bobby and coming back, and I was making absolutely no headway in New York City at all.
Mm-hmm.
I was about half an hour away. Elvin would be at the Vanguard. To go in to see it, I'd have to park, and I'd have to this, and I'd go see Mel Lewis once in a while, but I wasn't really getting into the scene.
Mm-hmm.
And I was on the road with Bobby, and I was kind of happy to do that, but Bobby got called to do a recording. And I thought, wow, I'm going to get to be on a recording. And I didn't understand the concept of how recordings worked at that point. That they were, a company had done 10 tracks, and they were just looking for someone to sing. And they said, Bobby Rydell, let's put him on the thing.
I see.
So time comes, Bobby does the recording, I'm not involved. And I kind of got annoyed. I thought, this is going nowhere. I got to get my life going. I'm just going to end up with this. I got to do something else. So I ended up leaving Bobby. Fast forward a few years later, I became friends with Dr. Roy Siegel, who's a chiropractor in New York. He's a drummer, and he's like the drummer's chiropractor. And one time I was in there, I think he had Billy Cobham in one room and me in another one, and Simon Phillips and Rod Morgenstein were all in the office. He would treat dancers and drummers, and he did a brochure on how to sit at the drums. I'm the example, because I sit like curved. I was the example of how not to sit. He had Dino Dinelli from the Rascals was the guy who was.
Okay.
I'm like, I think the brochure is still there. But so we're talking, and I just mentioned, I played with Bobby Rydell. I said, Bobby Rydell, I did a recording with Bobby. He's the drummer on the tracks, and he never got paid.
My gosh.
So it was
typical record industry, man.
So that led me to leave Bobby Rydell, move into New York, and then lo and behold, Bob Moses was leaving Gary Burton's group. I was the only one Gary auditioned because I knew all the songs. Pat got me to audition. So 1976, I get to play in the Gary Burton Quartet. And I was just watching a video of, there's one video that kind of intermittently, yeah, there it is.
I ran across that on Facebook 2 days ago or something. I'm like, man, that's
So
because I think didn't you guys record this Steve Swallow, right?
yeah, it
Steve
was
Swallow, Pat, Gary, and you.
right.
I have some vinyl of all you guys. I got Aquamarine on vinyl. I have all your stuff on vinyl. Yeah,
Oh, that's great.
yeah. But so that's cool. So I'm sorry I interrupted, but
No.
you auditioned with Gary. You were the only one he auditioned,
Yeah,
and then
the only one he considered. He just wanted to get somebody quick who knows the book. He got some
yeah,
gigs, and they had
cool.
a full tour, I think is what it was, and a recording plan. So I got to play in this group, and the first recording I ever did was with that band in Oslo, Norway. And there's a video that I just watched yesterday of that group, which intermittently disappears from YouTube, but it's on there right now. If you hit Gary Burton Norway, it's there. And it's a full set of us playing that music, and I loved it. I had a great time. Swallow, to play with, I mean, well, Pat and Gary both, they were all amazing, but to play with Steve Swallow, it's just.
The guy's amazing. Is he still playing? Is he alive?
He's alive, and he's together with Carla Bley. There have been a couple forever.
That's right. I actually knew that. I don't know how I knew.
Yeah.
There you go, man. There you go.
Look I was a kid, 23.
Man, so was that an ECM recording you guys did?
Yeah, called Passengers.
I think I have that on vinyl, actually.
Yeah.
I haven't played any vinyl in a while because I need to get a new stylus. And I just haven't. But it's so interesting because that period of time, to me, I was in high school. I graduated '79. I turned 59 last week. So when I look back, but Buddy Rich was my first influence, right? I saw him when I was 9, and that sealed the deal because my dad was a drummer and a really talented musician. He could do it all: write, compose, arrange, play the piano, play the vibes, play the drums. I'm just a drummer. That's all I can do, at least so far. Although I'm thinking of buying.
I am the same. That's all.
I don't. Although I talk with Marcus Reuter often. It's a little project we're working on, and I think he has me talked in to try and the touch guitar. But that's a different topic. But the bottom line is, when I look back, my 7th grade English teacher, who I'm grateful, thank you, turned me on to, as he would call him, Billy Cobham and Chick Corea. That's how he pronounced it. He says, I'm an English teacher. That sounds better to me. So Mahavishnu, Herbie Hancock, Headhunters, all of a sudden the doors of fusion opened up. Return to Forever, but and then I was an addict. And then so all through high school, I'm listening to that. And then Gary Burton, I heard somehow, I think my dad, because he liked him, because my dad would play vibes. And so I heard you, I think, before Metheny, but of course, when I saw you with Metheny, I think it was '79 at Cornell. What I'm trying to say, actually, in a long-winded way of coming back around with my ADD and finally getting back to the point, is that was such a special period of time, though, and the magic that occurred in so many different musical situations, and the distinct voices that people had, or developed, I should say, and still have, if they're with us, but it's still out there on these recordings, and the distinct voice that you have as a drummer, as a musician. When you hear Pat, it's Pat. When you hear Gary, it's Gary. There's no mistaking people, and to me, that's a real special thing. And then as a group, it was like the group statement, the group identity, the Pat Metheny group identity. I mean, it's really so much magic was occurring back then. Not that it isn't now, but it was different then, and it felt different to me. I'm old enough to, I guess, look back 40-something years and say, okay, yeah, it was different.
Yeah, it was different. I mean, and also there were places to play and audiences that really listened to it.
Yeah.
And a wide variety of so many things that you could experience. And that's something now as a teacher, I am confused in my ability to guide students because it's so different than it was. When one of the reasons it was so confusing when I was graduating in 1975 from college was there were so many opportunities just waiting. When I moved to New York, you could play with Stan Getz, Diodato, Astrid Gilberto, Jerry Mulligan, Clark Terry.
Yeah,
Blah, 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 blah. It was like 30 or 40 people Hubert Laws, Freddie Hubbard.
You recorded with Hubert, I think, don't you?
Yeah.
Didn't you?
I got
Yeah.
lucky, one of my early recordings was with him.
I probably have that too, because my dad was a big Hubert fan, so I bought all the vinyl.
Just a record date I got called for, and it was really fun. And Mike Richmond played bass, who became a lifelong friend. And Hiram.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
It was great, but there was now the options. When kids are graduating school, I'm thinking, okay, if it were me, I mean, I'm attracted to some of the music that's being played now, but it doesn't. We were ready to sell everything and just drop everything, and that's what we had to do. And I was able to just make a living somehow. I kept my expenses low. I was able to always make more than I spent. And, my parents, my dad died very young. My mom is actually still with us at 98. But
great.
Wow. All through the career, I'm so lucky with her. But they would always ask, have you taken, whenever I'd get down about something, my mom would always say, have you taken this as far as you think you can go? And it always felt like it was the beginning of another chapter.
Yeah.
It was always about how just getting better was the whole thing. It wasn't about fame or fortune or anything. It was just get with people that inspire you to keep going to another level. And luckily I was able, the lifestyle was able to take care of itself somehow through that. But now I don't know how kids can do it. I don't know what do you want to do in New York? Do you want to be in Wynton's band? Do you want to be in Kenny G? Do you want to play with Michael Bublé? What are the choices?
Yeah.
Those choices to me, not that I'm putting any of it down, were not as dramatic as the choices I was inspired by. Also, I felt, and I'm sort of talking just about how I felt, but Elvin would be at the Vanguard for a week, and then so-and-so would be here, and you get to see DeJeanette, and they're still around, but not nearly in the plentifulness of the inspiration that you had. And there's other people today that are inspiring, but the older jazz heroes that I had.
Oh, yeah.
And that was my world. That's why I'm going back and, revisiting lots of older music, and that's kind of what I've been doing now. But
now, wait a minute. Is that the book you showed me before we started rolling? Let's talk about the book right now, man, because this is something I need to get a copy of. Is it on Amazon?
Yes, I'll send you one as a present. Just send me an address. It's available on Amazon. It's self-published with Harold and I. Well, the story of this is 1960. Again, I mentioned Mr. Geist said,
yes,
first recording you got to hear Basie Straight Ahead. So I fell in love with it. Harold Jones is the drummer on that.
Yeah.
Those of you remember from Blazing Saddles, there's a scene where on little rides, and there's Harold on the drums. So in '68, my parents took me to Atlantic City before gambling. It was just a resort. And I remember it was a Sunday, and I just wanted to be alone, and my parents were walking on the beach, and I went off by myself, and there was a thing called Steel Pier, which was a big pier that went out into the ocean.
Yeah, I remember going. I'm interrupting slightly because I was there also before it was a resort, because my aunt lived there.
Okay.
Right. My mother grew up in Westfield, New Jersey, and my aunt and her, all that. I still have a cousin there, but my aunt moved to before it was a gambling place. Yeah, and I remember the pier. Yeah.
So I went on the pier, and I remember there were two places that they're having music simultaneously this afternoon. One, I think it was the Four Lads were singing, and I stuck my head in, and I went, okay, I don't need it. And I kept on, no offense, Four Lads.
But no, that's what I would have done.
And then I kept on walking, and in the casino in the back, there's the Basie band about to do an afternoon matinee.
Wow.
And I walk in, and I look up at the drums, and there's Harold setting up, and he looks at me, sees a kid, and he goes, come here. And he grabs me and sits me on the stage next to the bass drum.
No way.
And
that's so cool.
And I spent 2 sets hanging with Harold in the band. They were all in shorts, and it was a hot day, and they just played a set. But it changed my life so dramatically. And I remember in between sets, we went behind, they had the diving hole, the girl would dive on the pool, which I later heard that she was blind and no one knew it.
Oh,
There was a whole movie made about the diving horse and the blind girl, but Harold and I won. And then he became the third of the great drummers that became my influence. Joe Morello.
Joe, Mel, Harold. Wow.
Harold was a little younger, and Harold was on the road with Basie, so we stayed in touch. And then Basie came to Miami, and he got me into the club, and I got to see them play again.
Jeez, man.
He became the drummer with Sarah Vaughan for 10 years, and I played opposite them. Pat and I were in Brazil, and we played opposite Sarah Vaughan, so I got to watch him with Sarah.
Gee, that's cool. That's cool.
And then later in life, now he replaced Clayton Cameron about 15 years ago with Tony Bennett, and up until the COVID, he's the drummer with Tony.
That's who I saw with Tony, was Clayton.
Yeah.
Probably about 20 years ago. Yeah, about 20 years ago.
Monster with the brushes. He would come out and do a brush solo. He's amazing also.
Beautiful.
That incredible brush book. But so fast forward, there's the way that this kind of came about was I was thinking about Harold a lot, and I have a video when I used to take lessons with Joe. It was pre-internet. You know, I was they might have Joe died 2011. Maybe internet was starting toward the end, but the most of the time I was spending with him, to find a video of Joe playing with Brubeck was few and far between.
Yeah.
Almost never. Now I wish we could see them all as we can now, but he didn't have very many. And one day I went over to Joe's house, and he was in his underwear, and we were just going to work on the drum pad. And Brubeck had sent him a VHS of them playing somewhere, and he stuck it in. And he said, Gottlieb, let's watch this. He puts it in. And I had a video camera. I said, Joe, can I video you watching yourself? He said, yeah, I don't care. So I have a video of Joe in his underwear going, Gottlieb, look, see? Look
man.
So I had watched it barely, a couple of years ago, or 8 years ago or something. And I have that video after Joe had died. And I was thinking about Harold still with us, still alive, still playing so great. And now we're in a day where, it used to be when you would do a book, you had to put music in the book. You'd have to have a CD or a DVD.
Right.
Now, with everything on the internet, kids can find Basie Straight Ahead and Swingin' Big Band and Standing Ovation, these classic records that Harold is on. You don't need to put the music in. So what I did is I started transcribing 76 charts.
Whoa.
With a kind of a
oh man, look at that.
Drum composite lead sheet.
Beautiful.
Where, oh, this is Broadway. So so I wrote it out so you could actually use it as a sight reading book.
Nice.
I transcribed everything Harold played. And for those watching who are not familiar with Harold's drumming, he is a big band drummer who he's like Buddy, like Mel, one of the most unique in history, where he would play just parts of figures. Like if the band went boo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-da-doo-da, if I'm sight reading that, I might go boo-ga-doo-ba-doo-ba-doo-da-ba-dak. Harold would play boo-doo-doo-doo-doo-ah. He would hit like little parts of it that make the music soar. And I've never heard anybody do it like it before him or after. Sonny Payne was different, Butch Miles different, all great, but Harold had a unique thing. So, I got to close the hi-hat here. Because of that video with Joe, I called Harold and said, can I just come out and can we just listen? Can I videotape you listening to you from 40 years ago? And he said, yeah. He's the greatest guy. Harold, I love him.
That's so cool.
Dad, I went out 3 or 4 times to San Francisco and I videotaped him and got him to show. In fact, at some point I want to edit it and kind of use it to promote the book, but it took about 6 years to compile this thing.
Yeah, that looks pretty big, man. That 76 charts and all the other stuff in it. You got
400 pages. I mean, and I had taken, there was a meeting at the Drum Channel over by DW, and here's Harold, Joe, and Louis Belson, a picture that I took.
No way, man. Louis was a cool guy. I got to meet him a few times. What a nice guy. Jeez.
And I didn't want to insult Harold by putting the book out and, getting I mean, not that it makes much money anyway, but we self-published it. Amazon has a thing where you just make the book, you give it to them, doesn't cost you anything,
Yeah.
and they publish it. So it's self-published. My students at school who sit with these recordings sound 1,000 times better. You play along with the recording and you copy what Harold's playing. Because a lot of times, Beth, my wife, who's a great percussionist, and I get to judge high school kids. She more percussion and I judge. But those charts from the Basie Straight Ahead days, which were the Sammy Nestico charts, which became very popular because it was the first set of Nestico charts that were published for kids to play in school. They still play them. Basie Straight Ahead, Switch in Time, Fun Time.
Yeah.
I can tell in 2 seconds if the drummer ever heard Harold or not.
Oh, yeah, sure.
If they didn't, it's appreciably worse than if they had. So this book was written so that I can give it to every high school drummer. Just listen to this, and you'll swing, and it'll sound better.
See, that's so cool. So I'm going to go back for a minute, off topic slightly, because I'm glad to hear you say that about Amazon. Today is the day, not to talk about me, but we're going to for 10 seconds. I do a lot of work with people with Parkinson's. And I've taught.
Thank you for doing that, man.
Oh, well, it became a passion. It's kind of a long story, which I won't say right now, but the bottom line is today is the day I submit both files to Amazon, the cover, which is finally done, the high-res PDF, and the content, which is, I don't know, like 500 pages. And I'm self-paginating and formatting it, and it has been a total bitch. But I did print out the cover, and I wrapped it around another book. It's going to look like this.
It's fantastic.
So a friend of mine wrote the foreword, and I've got a bunch of contributors, doctors, and people with Parkinson's who are like, well, this brings me into another subject here. You've done some work with Jeff Richmond, haven't you, the guitar player?
Yeah, sure.
I knew that because when Jeff has become a very good friend, he also lives with Parkinson's disease. In fact,
now, I haven't talked to Jeff in a couple of years. I think you mentioned something in an email. I need to call him. How is he doing? I had no idea that he was ill.
Well,
I don't want to talk about it in the forum, I understand, but
Oh, no, it's totally cool. I just posted a second conversation with Jeff Richmond earlier this week. We did something similar to this because he's become a very, very good friend. And what a sweet person, man.
He's the best.
I love Jeff. I love Jimmy Haslip. I mean, Jimmy Haslip's the one who I've known. I met him through a friend of mine, Edgar Pagan and Frank Malfitano, about 12 years ago when it was one of Lorber's tours with, I forget the left-handed drummer, really good. But then, Randy Brecker and whoever else. And Jimmy, yeah. And then Jimmy produced my last CD I did as a musician when I was actually doing that for a living 10 years ago. And then I just did, this is kind of a story. I had to teach in Los Angeles a year ago, February. So 2 years ago now, Jimmy called and said, I got a friend, he has Parkinson's, the tremor's kind of messing with his picking finger, and the other hand too, and he's losing some dexterity, speed and all that. And so, well, I'll be happy to help. And then he tells me who it is and said, you're kidding me. I've got like 10 of his CDs. It's Jeff Richmond. And then we called, talk with each other. So since then, I've been helping him as I can. We got a workshop coming up this weekend, my full 2-day workshop. I teach all over the world, is now on Zoom, of course. We'll also have an interactive Zoom. But Jeff and Jimmy and I actually put a CD together.
Oh.
And so as I've gotten to know Jeff, one of the things that he told me, he says, you're going to talk with Danny? So he's the nicest guy in the world.
Adam, come on. So is he.
And, I've heard that about you anyways, and it's such a pleasure to talk with you. I mean, I could talk all day. I don't want to take all your time. I do have a couple more questions. I like 50 more, but I'll ask you a couple more. But yeah, this is Jimmy and Peter Erskine's on it a little bit.
Congratulations, that's great.
I've known Peter since I was 11.
No kidding.
He was on his first tour ever with Stan Kenton. He played in this.
Nice. There you go. I mean, he's the greatest.
And then, what a nice guy, a classy guy. And so we did the recording, and, Jeff, I talked to him a couple days ago. He's doing well. I'll send you a note afterwards, and I can update you on the situation there.
I'm going to give him a call because, you know, we stopped. I used to go to the NAMM show. I used to get hired to go, and Jeff would, and I would, he would try to hook up a clinic at MI, and we'd do things around it. And then I stopped. Unfortunately, Jack Westheimer, who owned the court company, passed away, and my reason for going there became less fun. So I stopped kind of really doing it.
I see, yeah.
And that was my time to hang with Jeff, and we just kind of drifted. I had no idea he was ill, though. So.
Yeah, but he's doing well, though. I mean, you know, I've worked with so many people with Parkinson's who've been, you know, it affects everyone uniquely differently, but he's doing well, you know. He had a hip replacement last year. I had a hip replacement 6 months ago. We're both moving better. We feel better.
Good.
And it's really a pleasure to know him. He's like a brother, you know. It's amazing. And Jimmy, too. So what I wanted to do, I was just curious with so the book, that's so cool. I can't wait to get mine submitted today. And
I'm so happy we self-published it. It's been nothing but great, and you can get very inexpensive author copies and send them to people, and it's great.
Exactly. I actually plan on ordering a couple hundred copies as soon as I proof the proof, and then boom, done, because I have pre-orders, and I just want to get them out there to help people. But so this book here is on Amazon, and what's the title of the book again?
It's called Harold Jones: Interpretation of Big Band Swing.
Beautiful.
And co-written by the two of us, and I had help, you know, because I am a full professor at a school. I'm taking advantage of the things that the school has to offer, and there's this wonderful guy named Mike Boyles who works in the computer lab, and they allowed him to help me put this together. I would have never been able to figure this out because when we started uploading it, the music would print weird. I mean, there's a quirky thing to it. But it took forever to do it, but it was really good. So I'm actually working on 2 more at the moment.
Oh, that's fantastic, man. That's so good.
And one
that's so good.
With Terry Gibbs, I'm going to do Mel's parts in the Dream Band.
No way. Jeez. I loved Mel, man. Well, you know, when we actually I'm kind of going slightly stream of consciousness here. One of the things I've really loved about your playing, I mean, I can use a lot of words, musicality and whatever, but your use of cymbals was always something from the very first recordings that I heard. But then when I saw you the first time, and I had a balcony seat, I was front row balcony, so it was actually a beautiful seat with these little mini binoculars. I'm like focusing in, and I don't know, is it who were your biggest cymbal influences? I mean, Mel had a magic way with cymbals. I loved his cymbal playing. He was such a beautiful cymbal player, you know?
It was, you know, I talk about it sometimes because just mostly with the kids when I'm teaching. Mel was the beautiful touch of those dark cymbals that would, and he would orchestrate really. He'd play the melody of the band, you know, on the cymbals.
Yes.
And I sort of just got that from him. But there was also a thing with the Joe Morello technique where it's all about levels and being able to control the volume. So you're basically starting. You remember when you were taking a lesson with him? You know, you started at a low level or a higher level, or a higher level, or a higher level. So there's no tension in the body, and you can go. You can with the same stick. You can play all kinds of different dynamics. So it allowed me on a cymbal to go up and down very easily. And Pat dynamics in there. So, and then you add the fact that you can, you know, do stuff with the left hand on the side.
Yeah, I never got that happening though. Beautiful.
You know, you can do all kinds of little flourishes, and there was that. But then, recording wise, Tony Williams with Miles, of course, that.
Oh God, yeah.
And then Airto on Return to Forever.
Don't you love that? Gosh, that's beautiful.
And then Bob Moses, who when I would see with Gary Burton, he had 3 flat cymbals. That's all he had at one point.
It's almost like a Roy Haynes setup almost.
Yeah, but he took it out. It was like 3 wacky flat cymbals, and I went, I like that.
Yeah.
So I got the flat cymbal thing from Moses to use more than one. And then Pat was really interested in the stereo-ness of performance. He would have the PA, I mean, which I guess is commonplace now, but the PA was in stereo. So he was really trying to get the audience experience to have a kind of a surround feeling. So
Yeah.
by having two flat cymbals mic'd left and right in the speakers and the audience left and right, it kind of
nice.
gives a really interesting approach. So
Gee, that's so cool. That's such great, stories. I mean, and plus I lived through that time where I got to see you with, Pat, and then with John McLaughlin a couple times. Now you were with Pat. How long was that?
Well, yeah, just to complete the story, Gary
Yeah.
Burton did for Pat and I. Pat had done his first recording with Jocko and Bob Moses. We were all thrilled because
Oh
it was
yeah.
great. We were all champions of everybody. So Pat finally got his record deal.
Is that the Bright Size one? Yeah. Okay.
It came out, and my goal in life was to be on a Pat Metheny album. That was all I wanted, and my other goal was to go to Harmony House on Route 22 in Union, New Jersey, and that's what my goal.
Oh man, that was the place to be, right?
And buy a vinyl record with my name on it was my goal.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to remember the chronology. And luck had it that Pat got me in Gary Burton's band, and we did a recording for ECM,
Yeah.
which went on called Passengers.
Yep.
And I had a funny thing with that, because in the studio, we finished the recording, and I put the headphones on, and I'm listening to the playback, and the drums are really loud. And I'm going, man, I'm playing some stuff. Yeah. And then the recording comes out, and Pat and Steve Swallow had heard it. I said, what do you think? And they went, it's okay. I went, it's okay. And I put it on, and the drums are squashed. I mean, you can still hear what I'm playing, but bang, 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 sounds like ding, bing, bing, bing. It's kind of just a mellow thing.
Okay.
I'm still proud of it. And when I hear it now, I think it still sounds really good. But I went to Harmony House. I didn't tell the guy at the counter. I was on it. I bought an album with my name on it. So that was that. And then my goal in life was someday to do an album with Pat. So after Gary Burton, no, actually, I was still in Gary's band. There was a break, and Eberhard Weber, who became a big hero, playing that.
Love that guy.
And we had done an ECM Festival of Music tour, me playing with Gary Burton, and Eberhard was there with his band, and Dee Jeanette was there, and Keith Jarrett would play on a couple of them, and Abercrombie was on some of it, and Ralph Turner. And Eberhard had a 2-week tour of January of '77 of Europe, and he needed a drummer to replace John Marshall, who had something else to do. So Eberhard called me, and Pat had a new album to do. So basically, he orchestrated a thing where I would go play with Eberhard for 2 weeks, and then we'd both go up to Norway and record what became Watercolors.
Oh, really? Okay. Interesting.
Eberhard, which, when I look back on it now, was some of the heaviest music I ever played in my life.
Yeah, that's a beautiful album.
Someone sent me a live concert audio of me from '77, Charlie Mariano playing saxophone, and Reiner Bruninghaus on keyboards, and Eberhard, just amazing. So we flew up to Norway, and Eberhard is the bass player on Watercolors.
Yeah.
So I got to be on Pat Metheny album number 2, My Life Dream. I recorded with Pat. It was it. And then Gary Burton ended. Pat and Lyle took I don't know if that's when they did Joni Mitchell. They did a tour with Joni, and they also played with the singer Marlena Shaw. And then Pat started the group in the fall of '77, and he asked me to play. And he said, "What bass player would you like to play with?" And I knew Mark from school, and we were in a different group of people at school. But I said Mark would be great, and that's how the group started. So that was beginning of middle of '77, and I was in the band '77 to '83. That's what I was.
Okay. I just I was just watching the YouTube version of the Joni Mitchell Shadows and Light, which was I think it's 1980. Because Jocko, Michael Brecker, Lyle, Don Elias. Did you ever work with Don Elias?
Not much, but he was always nice.
I only met him one time. I got to hang out with him a little bit because of a friend of mine who used to work with him in the Lou Rawls band. And so we just hung for a few minutes after a show he did with Sanborn. And his smile was so big, and he was I just felt a really good energy from him. Positive all the time.
I've become friends with Gene Perla, the great bass
Oh
player.
man, yeah.
He and Elias are, in fact, I want to mention an album that's available. It's called Bill's Waltz. Bill's Waltz. It's a Gene Perla and Elvin Jones recording. This fast forwards years later. I ended up later in career going over to Europe a lot and playing with some of the radio big bands, the WDR.
Oh, WDR, yeah, yeah.
And the NDR would do very different kind of projects. And I also got to play with the great piano player composer George Gruntz, who was a Swiss composer, had a big band. I used to tour with him a lot.
Yeah.
And at one point, George had hired me and my wife, Beth, to come over and do a little gig at a resort in Switzerland. And Gene Perla was the bass player. And we hit it off, and we would go hiking and go up to the top of these mountains during the day. And on one of the hikes, Gene said, you know, I've got this recording. I don't know what to do with it. Elvin had passed away. And it was a duo recording of Elvin Jones on drums and Gene on piano, playing music from an album period that was really important to me in the early 70s. It was called Genesis. Elvin Jones was a picture of Elvin with a sky behind him, and it was Merry Go Round was from that period with Jan
Okay.
And Lighthouse. It was all kind of around that time period. But it was basically Gene playing this music, and Gene had an idea that he was going to put a big band to Elvin's drumming and orchestrate the drums. Elvin passed away. He had a 2-track tape of Elvin and him. He didn't know, and drums were separated, but he didn't know what to do with it. I suggested he contact the NDR big band. He did. He wrote arrangements. He flew there. They all recorded to Elvin's drumming.
No way.
He put it out.
I gotta check that out.
It is such a great album.
Yeah.
And it was pieced together, you know, kind of in a modern way. The NDR, the guys didn't think it was that big a deal. But when I heard what Gene did to this thing, it's kind of gone under the radar. But it's called Bill's Waltz. And if you can get it, or if you need to get it, I'll get you a copy. But
I'll find that. You know, I don't know Gene personally, and I've never met him, but we've communicated some. It's probably been a year. I think he's down in Easton, Pennsylvania still.
Yeah.
And I have one of my best friends lives there. So on my next visit down there, side note, last time I was there, I ran into Larry Holmes, the boxer.
Oh, no kidding, down
I have
there?
a picture, I'm 6'2", and Larry's bigger and taller. Man, that was fun. But I've always wanted to meet Gene, you know, because he did some really, really great stuff. One of his solo albums a few years ago I have that has big band. I love it. And then, you know, the work with Elvin, and I can't remember if he's on the Mountain album with Elvin.
Yeah, I think that was
On the Mountain is so freaking awesome. The elasticity, man, the elasticity kills me. I love it.
Yeah, I love Gene. It was really one of the great gifts to meet him. I love him.
Oh, so much. I can only imagine. Yeah, man, we might have to do a part 2 at some point, Danny, because we're only up to about 1983 right now.
I know. There's a
and
lot.
You've been doing a lot since then. I have another question too. You ever? There was a band I was in the early '80s, and the keyboard player's name was Doug Hall.
Oh, Doug produced Aquamarine.
I know he did. Now, are you in touch with him still?
We're Facebook friends, and there's a big gap in our catching up. I mean, he helped me pull both of those albums off because he was working in a jingle studio. We were able to get the time free because I didn't have a budget. And Doug wrote a lot of the tunes and played keyboards and, you know, orchestrated it and kind of honed Satriani into, you know, get it to
Oh, wow. Yeah, I forgot about that. That's right. I've got that on vinyl. I just was looking the other day. So, yeah, Aquamarine. And I saw Doug Hall's name when I bought it at the record store. I bought it because of you. But when I saw Doug's name, it's like, oh, this is so cool. I just played with him like 4 years ago for a year. And
I hope he's doing well. We have not been in touch, and it's a big gap. I should be, but I just, you know, I think every once in a while I'll see a post on Facebook and acknowledge it, but we really haven't caught up in years.
It's hard, you know, and especially with all the people you've worked with and this and that. I mean, just life in general, it can be hard to keep touch with so many people. And social media makes it a little easier a lot of times, but still, it is tough.
Did you want to ask something about the Metheny to Mahavishnu?
I do, totally. I want to ask you basically 3 things right now. Those are like to work with that band. You've done Gil Evans too.
The greatest.
And what are you doing now? Where are you located and where are you teaching?
Okay, well, I live in Nashville, in Franklin, Tennessee.
Oh, I know where that is. Yeah, I've been there many times. In fact, I taught my workshop there a couple of years ago at the YMCA in Franklin.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I teach at the University of North Florida in Jacksonville, Florida. It's kind of a whole interesting path. I lived in New York for 20 years, single, nothing happening. I met my wife, Beth, who was living in Orlando with 2 kids, 7 and 9.
Mm-hmm.
You want to get married and be stepdad? Yeah. So she's a great percussionist. We hit it off, musically and personally. This was in '98, and I kept our little apartment in New York and moved to Orlando. And she was teaching at Rollins College, and I got offered a position as an adjunct at University of South Florida, where I was able to teach master students. And then this full-time position at UNF opened up, and
nice.
This was in '98. And I've been keeping it going. I teach 2 classes online anyway. I teach the history of jazz 2 levels.
Oh,
so
nice.
Even before COVID, I was pretty much an online person, which allowed me to live anywhere. So I used to commute from Orlando. And then we lived in Alabama for a minute. Beth was teaching at University of Alabama. And then we ended up moving to Nashville because her parents were, her dad unfortunately since passed away, but her parents were here and her sister were here. And my stepson and his wife and their baby live here, so we're.
Oh, great! Yeah, I go to Nashville usually about once a year to see one of my best friends, and he's just I've known him since I was 12. You ever work with Adam Niddy? Isn't he down there? Adam Niddy?
Yeah, great. Yeah.
I don't know him. We've communicated. I was gonna hang out with him last time I was there, but it just didn't work out. But so what was it? I guess just. Real quick, I mean, I have all day. I just don't want to take too much of your time, Danny. You've been so generous. I appreciate this so much. And to me,
Beth needs me. I'll go away. But
okay, I mean, all of this to me is really special to hear about because these are I have so many memories of seeing you with Metheny. I saw you more with McLaughlin a couple of times, and then with Elements because we were opening for you guys 88, 89, somewhere in that arena. But side note, I remember one particular concert because I lived in Evanston for 2 years near Northwestern. You played a couple of years in a row at Ravinia.
Yes.
And I'll never forget when my wife, we weren't married yet. She came out and I brought her. So don't judge my wife by this. She's the coolest person in the world. But back then, I'm like in tears, right? We're listening to Are You Going With Me? Da, da, boom, boom, dun, dun. And that song is like the way it builds and the way you don't even hit the snare drum for like 10 minutes. You're doing rim clicks and at the end of the song and it's building and Pat solos and I'm in tears and she said, "What's wrong?" I said, "Nothing. These are happy. These are tears of beautiful joy, the most beautiful music I've ever heard." And it's like, I just can't believe that music can be so moving and it can make you feel many different ways. That's actually part of the therapy I do now with people with Parkinson's. But I just had to tell you that because I've cried every time I saw you, I think. So I'm not crying today.
I might have been for, let me, in fact, it's funny, that's my best friend calling right now. His name is Ken Dashow. He's a radio personality on Q1043 in New York.
Cool.
And he does the classic rock, but we've been music friends forever. And he just interviewed Carlos Santana and Cindy Blackman the other day, and he sent me the link saying that Carlos was saying if I ever teach, what I do is learn an instrument so you can give yourself chills. That's how you play the instrument.
Whoa.
And Ken sent it to me because he wanted me to hear that quote.
So that's so simple yet so profound and powerful. Yeah.
And that's
so. What was it like? Take me through real quick. Take me through Mahavishnu, Elements, Gil Evans, and anything else you want.
Well, let's see if I can give a quick history. So Metheny ended in '83. It was a little weird. I was out interviewing Airto to work on a book. I had actually in a break. Mark and I both got to play with Airto and Flora Purim, which was a dream to play with Airto and learn his cymbal thing. And And again, what I do is I find people that I love and I help them with a book so I can learn from them. I did it with Moses, I did it with Ayrto, did it with help with Joe Morello with his book. You know,
Oh,
it
cool.
just, and now the thing with Harold Jones. So it's a way of kind of getting, you know, helping somebody but learning from him. So I was out working on a book with Ayrto, and Nana had left the Pat Metheny group, and Pat wanted me to talk Ayrto into joining the group. And it turned out that Pat was trying to come up with something different, and he decided he wanted to try Paul Wertigo on drums just to give it a different flavor.
Mhm.
I kind of knew it was coming, but it was still a little bit, you know, it was kind of an official ending to that 7-year period.
Yeah.
And at first it was, you know, it ended. I was caught off guard by it, and you know, I kind of treated it gracefully and just said, Pat, it's been the greatest. You know, if you ever want me to play with you again, we'll work on something. But I then went through a little bit of a what do I do now period. And I remember reading there was an interview with Chester Thompson, who's become a friend here in Nashville,
Oh,
who
cool.
just had left Weather Report again under circumstances that were not necessarily his choosing.
Mhm.
And he was saying he went through this soul searching period. Can I really play? What am I doing with my life? And he worked through it and then subsequently gets to gig with Phil Collins.
Yeah, right.
So, and I read this thing and I said, you know, if Chester Thompson can go through this, I can go through it too. So I just said, okay, I'm just going to do the best I can. And let me move back into Manhattan and see where I'm at with life. And Mark got us a gig with Randy Brecker and Ileana Elias, who were married at the time.
Sure, yeah, right.
And we toured, and it ended up being Randy and Ileana were so nice and so fluid as musicians. It was like getting back on the horse.
Yeah.
It was great. And then Mark got us a gig with Michael Franks. So we did a year touring with Clifford Carter on keyboards,
Yeah.
great Joe Carroll on guitar,
Oh, yeah.
Manolo on percussion, who played on Heavy Weather.
Yeah, Manolo Virginia.
Yeah, and Bill Evans on saxophone, and Michael Franks and Mark and I, and we toured. I remember we did, I think it was a 2-week tour only in France. So we just played all over France, and it was great. And then Bill was about to join Mahavishnu. They were doing a reunion tour, Billy and John.
Oh, Bill, yeah, okay.
It was going to be Billy Cobham and John and Bill Evans on saxophone and Mitch Foreman on keyboards.
Mhm.
And we were all, you know, he was going to leave Michael Franks and join John McLaughlin. So one night, Bill calls me and says, John McLaughlin may call you tonight. Billy Cobham is not doing the tour. We need a drummer, desperately. John calls and says, Danny, can you fly to France tomorrow? And we had some upcoming Michael Franks gigs. I had to negotiate that, but I said, yes, of course. Yeah, you know, got on a plane and got there and ended up doing about a month's worth of gigs with this new Mahavishnu orchestra. And Jonas Hellborg on bass, and it was so much fun. And I had to deal with, where's Billy? You know, because he was advertised on the thing.
Oh, jeez. Oh, man.
They had a falling out and a misunderstanding that was like the stupidest thing you could ever imagine.
Yeah, I heard a story about, I don't know the story, but I heard something like that happened. Yeah.
John, the manager, he was a drag. Billy was trying to get details of the tour. The manager wouldn't respond. Billy finally said, look, here's my request for the tour. I need this, 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 and this, and this. John reads that and says, how dare Billy Cobham come on to me like that? Goodbye. I guess, and it could have been resolved in 2 seconds, but
yeah,
I ended up getting the gig and ended up touring. And hang on 1 second. There's my.
Hi.
Do you need me for anything?
How long have you gone?
Just a few more minutes. Okay. And we gotta talk about that because we play together. We haven't even touched on this.
That's Beth, right?
That's Beth. We're in Gary Sinise's Lieutenant Dan band.
I'd love to talk about that if you have a minute, because Gary Sinise, I've never met him. He seems like the coolest guy in the world.
He's the bass player. He's great, and he's
really. Oh wow, I had no idea.
It's unbelievable. I'll get to that. So anyway, I ended up joining John. We toured for a month. He was not 100% that happy with the music, and we had a week off at the end of the tour. It was in I think Biarritz or some exotic place. They treated us for a week, but John, I kept on hearing talk about they're going to get Weckl, they're going to get Omar, and I didn't know if I'd keep the gig. John ended up having me go back to New York and said, look, Danny, I want you to stay with this group, but I want to work with you, just the two of us. I did that with Billy Cobham. He flew me home. He flew me back to Monte Carlo 2 weeks later, and we spent 2 weeks drums and guitar. And
Wow.
he taught me all these Indian rhythms. What he really wanted me to do was just play a lot busier, and ended up figuring out what he wanted. And the gig lasted another 2 years, and then unfortunately there was a financial problem. The manager had ripped John off, and he ran out of money. It was weird. But we did some fun gigs. We played opposite. Peter Erskine was playing with the Weather Update.
Weather Update. I saw them. Yeah.
Them.
With Steve Kahn, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And so that Mahavishnu ended. I also got to play with Al Di Meola at the same time. I got stories. I could talk to you forever.
We'll do part 2 in a little while.
Al Di Meola put together a group called Al Di Meola Project with Airto on percussion.
Remember that?
And Chip Jackson on bass and Phil Markowitz on keyboards. So I was finishing up John's tour, and Al Di Meola was starting, and I wanted to do both, but there were conflicts on the rehearsal days. So you remember there was an airline called People's Express?
I remember that.
You could fly to cities for $39. So I had a thing, I had to fly into New Jersey to rehearse with Al, get back on the plane, go to Buffalo, play with John, fly back to New Jersey, rehearse with Al, fly to Pittsburgh, and I pulled it off, but it was just insane. Got to play with Al.
That's commitment, brother. That's commitment.
got to do one recording, which was great with Al, and then I got Mark. I subbed for Adam Nussbaum with Gil Evans' orchestra. Gil wanted to make some changes. I ended up playing with Gil's orchestra.
Yeah.
Mark Egan playing bass. We were, got to play together. Sting loved the group. He ended up using us to play a concert in Italy. That's on the internet. If you go to Sting and Gil Evans, you can see all of that.
Oh, cool. I'll check that out.
Then through Tom Malone in that group, I got to play in the Blues Brothers band for 3 years.
Oh, yeah. I remember hearing about that.
And then Duck Dunn wanted to make a change, and he ended up getting Steve Potts on drums, who was Al Jackson's nephew. But a week later, he hired me to play with Booker T and the MGs. I couldn't understand. I thought I got fired from one, and then I got the other gig. So I got to do Booker T. I got to do about 10 gigs with Cropper and Duck Dunn, and I've got some videos of that.
Wow, man.
And then Steve Potts left the Blues Brothers, and I got to go back. And then I got the teaching gig in 2005. Mm-hmm. And then Beth and I, when we got married, Beth had been a Disney employee, among other things, forever, and has played the Christmas show called Candlelight every year. Okay. So when we got married, I moved to Florida, I started playing Candlelight. Gary Sinise was one of the narrators at Candlelight.
Oh.
He knew me from the Pat Metheny group.
Oh.
He said, just started putting this Lieutenant Dan band together. This was 2003. We thought it was a joke. What could it be? 2004, the drummer who was playing with him, Tom Hipskin in Chicago, couldn't do a gig in Orlando. Gary wondered if Beth and I wanted to play. It became a life-changing event. Not only was it so good musically, Gary has great time, great intonation, plays perfect for this cover band.
Wow.
And the band, it's a 13-piece band. And it became, the short story is it started as something for fun. If it made a nickel, Gary would donate it. Then he was just sick of doing handshake. After 9/11, he got honored by the American Disabled Vets for having been in Forrest Gump. And it took him out because he was just an actor, but they made a big deal of a vet who comes back. So Gary started to volunteer for the USO. He didn't want to do handshake tours. He said, maybe I'll take a band. They let him take a band. Then we met him. We started doing USO tours. The first quadruple amputee came back from from Iraq. And it was a group in New York that wanted to build a home for him. So Gary donated the band. We played a concert. They raised the money. They built a home. He started to partner with these other groups, decided he couldn't control the money, stopped everything, started his own foundation. The band, at one point we were doing 50 gigs a year. It's now about 30. But he started to make a ton of money, and I think they made $30 million last year.
Oh my! Yeah, I heard he was very a philanthropist, if you will.
And 89% goes to the causes, so it's only 11% operating costs.
Yeah.
In 15 years, we've done almost 500 gigs. Beth plays percussion. I play drums. Tom Malone is now in the band.
Bones Malone?
Yes, who Bill Evans gig and got me in the Blues Brothers.
No way, that's so cool.
Well, actually, Mark got me to Gil Evans, but through Gil Evans, I got the.
Yeah.
It's been a fun ride of all this stuff. But
gosh, man, that's amazing. Actually, it's just amazing. It's just fantastic. I just a quick comment, and then one more question, real quick. I was talking with Dennis Chambers last week,
Ah,
And he was talking about working with McLaughlin, and the first thing he said is, "You can't possibly play enough drums for John."
yeah, yeah. I was doing my little cymbally thing, and it's like, you know.
That it's
And
impossible to overplay
yeah.
with John.
Oh, yeah, in fact, you're just going to, it's like, come on, you
Yeah,
know, he just wanted more.
I really enjoy the album. I can't remember the name of it. Um, but it's you were in the band. It's Jonas, and I just remember the first song on vinyl, and the first song. Well, maybe it's not the first one.
Adventures in Radioland, that album.
That one,
Yeah.
yes. And to see that live, because I think the album was put out before you did the tour, wasn't it? For that, because I think I knew the songs when you played them, and it was
Well,
so cool. You know how it is when you hear a recording and then you see it live, and it's like a whole different thing. And
there's one concert video that has come out many years later. John released us at Montreux with that band, and also
yeah,
there's the band with Nard and Michael Walden. I think it's a double concert,
oh
but
wow,
at least one concert of that band does exist. So
live in Montreux, right?
yeah,
I saw that on your discography a few days ago. I was looking. It's like in 2004 that was released or something, and I've got to find that. And yeah, that'd be cool. So you're a professor, so this will be an easy question for you. Um, what's your advice for the up and coming right now, whether any instrument, just as a musician who wants to perform? What is your advice?
well,
What's the wisdom?
I'm on the fence about a lot of things. I'm really also being a step parent of two kids who both got master's degrees in percussion, and
Whoa.
had anything but an easy time dealing with it. One has gotten out of it completely, got his master's from North Texas, rudimental champion center snare in the cadets, is now
Whoa.
going back for his MBA,
Uh-huh.
and he wants a career change, does not want to have to rely on making music for a living. And my
Yeah.
other stepson has done well as a percussionist, but it's really tough, and
It's
it's hand.
different now. Yeah.
I mean, now with the COVID, who knows what is the next phase of this is all going to be. But I am, you know, when I was coming up, if you did another career, it was like you were selling out somehow. You know, you
Yeah.
got to give music your all. I think
Yeah.
if it were me, I would do two things. I
Mhm.
think I would find a way to make a living, and I'd find a way to play music. I
Yeah.
just don't think, I mean, if you want to only play music, then I would do 100 things with it. I'd learn Pro Tools. I'd learn how to compose. I'd learn how to arrange. I'd
Yeah.
learn how to. I couldn't just play the drums. I
Yeah.
don't.
Maybe
I
producing or
just
something
think.
like that too. Yeah.
I just don't. I mean, I don't want to say it's advice, and I shudder when I say these things, but I just don't know how I would do it. If I couldn't find the things to do that I did when I was growing up. They just don't exist. And to move to New York, well, you know, we still have a little apartment in New York, which we're trying to sell, which right before the COVID is like the worst time you could even think of it. I lived in this little room for 20 years. There was so much to do. When I have been going back there, the things that I did just, there's no jingle scene, there's no recordings, there's no,
Right.
it's all, my work was predominantly Europe. And I
Yeah.
probably, if I was going to be a full-time musician, I'd probably set my sights on Europe.
Yeah.
I probably get, if I wasn't going to do two careers, I think I would have to make my living abroad. I don't think you could make it in the United States, but I'm thinking that maybe if you found computers, business, economics, something that excited you along with the drums,
Sure.
and look at it as a lifetime thing, and try to just get to play with people. The whole idea of what we did of hitting New York, and yeah, I don't know. It doesn't, I don't find it, maybe because I'm older, it doesn't seem as appealing. And I don't mean to sound negative, because there's so many people, got a couple of students and younger ones who are going to Berkeley, and they are bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And you talk to Victor Wooten and Steve Bailey, who teach at Berkeley. Steve runs the big. They are so excited about their programs and
Mhm.
the opportunities for musicians that exist. And some people do find their way and do well.
Yeah.
I just think you have to give it your all, and know that it's going to be a rough go being an artist. I just find it very daunting, and I just wonder if I would advise doing two things. That's one thought.
Well, yeah, I think that's actually really good advice because, in life for a lot of things, it's good to have a backup plan, and you never know. I mean, even there's some very, very well known, respected musicians. One drummer I'm thinking of in particular right now, I won't mention his name, but he sent me a text the other day. We've all watched him, seen him with all these different bands, and he's like, "COVID is breaking me. There's no work now." I know that next week.
He's not alone. I know many friends.
Yeah, yeah, and even before that, it's not like, he or a bunch of others were making a ton of money or anything like that. You might go on a tour and make some, and then you're off and you're just doing like little club dates. I did hear though, Scott Kinsey told me that the Baked Potato's opening and they're there next Tuesday, so he's actually going to be like a live gig at the Baked Potato, which is nice to hear.
Well, my student Jack, who just graduated with his master's, he just played 3 gigs in Jacksonville.
Wow.
They're going. I find it scary. I don't think it's safe to do it. And
Yeah.
I'm on the conservative side. I did one recording in Nashville. It was only drums. Everything was wiped down. I played to a track. They had everybody come in separately. But I understand recording. Pat Coyle just posted saying, sessions are coming back and nobody's social distancing. He said he just did a session with his friends and he didn't even know how to respond because everybody's tight quarters, and a camera crew came in to show Nashville and they all put a mask on. And when the crew left, they took the mask off. He just posted it on Facebook. I read that.
I mean, that's another thing that I'm not, well, I'll brag for 1 second. My son is a doctor and he's an emergency room doctor at Emory in Atlanta. And he's not seeing much COVID at all. In fact, he hasn't seen COVID in like weeks now.
Really?
He's in ER. And then but he's also conservative too. He's like, I don't know what to say. You guys still wearing masks up there? Yeah, we don't. We can't go in any of the stores or anything. Just God, not down here. The restaurants are packed. And, it's hard to know. It's too early to know what course or trajectory this COVID will take. But, it remains to be seen what will happen in the music industry and a lot of different industries. It's uncertain times still.
Yeah.
But well, listen, man, I love the stories. I really love the stories. I love your words of wisdom too for up and coming. I think that's a really smart move. Having a backup plan, sometimes it might come in really handy and save your ass. You know what I mean? And then maybe you'll get back to your main goal eventually. But a backup plan is so important.
Here's one thought. I mean, there's a student I love this guy. His name is Ben Adkins. He came to University of North Florida. He got his undergrad, then got a full scholarship to Florida State, got his master's in drumming, ran the second band.
Wow.
But his best friend had gotten an economics degree, even though he was the best keyboard player at UNF. Mm-hmm. And the two of them ended up getting jobs with Fidelity, an investment firm.
Oh, yeah.
But he got it because he had a master's, and he got a job where he didn't have to invest people's money. It was kind of a middle position. He's able to make a good living, has insurance, and he produced his first album. He started a record company. During the COVID. They broadcast all these bands, and he was involved. He has done nothing. I thought, is the drums going to be over? No. He's smoking. He sounds great. And the pressure's off to not have to do it to really make much money. He's got a whole other life. It's not pressured. He has a child, a second one on the way. And yeah, he's not letting the drumming go at all. So I just think that to me, I thought, if I was going to do it, I don't want to sell my soul like I did in the 70s and 80s because it's not there anymore.
Yeah, it's different now.
The things that I wanted to do, I don't, we couldn't do 300 days in a van with Pat Metheny these days, especially not now, but I just, that music doesn't have that appeal. It doesn't really, I don't know.
Yeah, no, great words of wisdom though. I agree.
That's the thoughts of today. I don't mean to be negative, but I'm thinking you should play music and take it seriously, but also have a way to make a living at the same time.
Well, I can speak from experience about, being a musician. I'm 59, so I'm old enough to know that here's when it's really bad. And I'm, a little ashamed to admit it. Well, actually not anymore. I don't care. But when 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when like $100 or $75 maybe even gig canceled because we had a snowstorm, and you were counting on that $100, and you're like stressed out because of it. That is not fun. That's not a good way to live. I don't play as well when I'm stressed, unless it's good stress. But when it's that kind of stuff, I mean, it's just not good. And that's when I wished, well, now I have something, and now any music I do, which is very little, I have no stress, and I feel much more creative. Because
I really think it's a good place to be because
yeah,
it's too. I was lucky because the time that I did it, I didn't have to suffer as dramatically as I think I would be now.
yeah,
And also, I like older people. I like older big band jazz. That's and
sure,
music that my heroes are. Are like Terry Gibbs and Mel Lewis and Harold Jones and basic.
absolutely.
And I'm spending my time analyzing it and hopefully helping the younger generation, learn more about it. And that's kind of what I'm doing with that. But if you have time, take a look at go to Gary Sinise's website, GarySiniseFoundation.org. There's
I
a
will.
million videos. And if you go to YouTube, there's one of us playing in front of the Capitol in 2018 at the National Memorial Day concert.
Oh, nice.
I love that band is the greatest band. Everybody, they're all amazing players, 5 singers. We got
Wow.
a fiddle player, Dan Myers, and it's great. It's
Well, I'll definitely check that out.
and it makes playing music have a whole philanthropic approach, which and plus I get to do it with my wife, and we play really well together. It's fun.
That's so good. Yeah, it just is like the perfect thing, it seems.
It's great. It's really, really good.
Well, I'll tell you what. Maybe down the road we do part 2 because you got
Let
a
me
lot.
know if you want to continue. Just let me know.
Yeah, I would love to. I'd love to. I'm gonna end the recording in a minute. But if you can stay with me for like 2 minutes max, I just have a couple things I wanted to tell you.
Okay.
And Danny, man, thank you. Thanks
Sure.
a million.
Pleasure.
You've been so generous with your time here, and I really appreciate all the words of wisdom, the history, very interesting, and all the beautiful music you've given us. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl, and thank you for what you're doing. It's fantastic.
Well, thank you, and thank you everyone for watching and for listening. I'm almost speechless because this is kind of surreal for me, but thank you. Thanks, Danny. Thank you, everyone. Have a fantastic day.